Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to the Salesforce Winter 25 release webinar. I'm Keir Bowden, the Salesforce CTO here at Credera, and here's what I'll be talking about for the next bit less than an hour. So we'll crack straight on in a change, because I've got a lot of slides to get through. In a change from our usual programming, I'm going to start with a feature that isn't actually GA yet, but you're going to be hearing a lot of noise about it at the moment, I should imagine, and I'm sure everyone wants to hear a little bit about it, which is Agentforce. So there are two aspects to Agentforce in the near term anyway. The first is the autonomous agent. So we've got a service development rep and a service agent. So these autonomous agents fulfill a role without needing a human in the loop, which is a bit of a departure from the previous generative AI attitude of Salesforce. So it's pretty entry-level tasks. The sales development rep is following up on leads, sending the emails or messages, thanking you for downloading a white paper, asking if you'd like to talk to an account executive, while the service agent is using the knowledge base to help customers, but it's able to do this without having to be trained on each type of interaction. So it's far more resilient than a chatbot. If it gets an unexpected question, it will try and reason its way out of it. There are other agents being planned, but I haven't seen that they are imminent. The sales and service should be GA by the end of this month, October 2024, safe harbor. And the other aspect is an AI assistant, also named Agentforce, and this will replace Copilot, or probably more accurately, iterate on Copilot. So it'll be able to learn, reason, and take action rather than simply retrieving information or suggesting actions. And it will achieve this via an improved reasoning engine and also using topics to group actions together. So topics kind of, again, tend to be a type of job role that you're asking your assistant to handle. So topics are available now. If you're using Copilot then and check your configuration, you'll see there's an overarching migration topic for all of your current actions. The improved reasoning engine is rolling out over the next few months and should be complete by, I believe, February 2025. But again, safe harbor, make your buying decisions only on GA products. You can view the Agentforce keynote from Dreamforce on YouTube at the short link shown here, well worth a view. And if you need to see more, there's the Agentforce World Tour event in London on October the 8th at the XL, starting at 8:30, and I shall be there, and you can sign up at the short link shown. Don't worry about capturing the short links. As usual, we'll share the slide deck out with everyone that registered. Okay, getting back to our usual format, we start with fond farewells, where we choke back a tear for those features that are exiting stage left. The marketing consent component goes in this release, so replace that with the privacy consent status component instead. We've been talking about this one for a while. Streaming API versions 23 through 36 also retire in this release. This unusually is not a breaking change, as any requests will be routed to the latest API version. However, it's good governance, especially if you're relying on a specific API version, to actually use that rather than hoping that the latest one will handle what you need handled. Salesforce Functions retires at the end of January next year. Must be one of the shortest periods of general availability ever, certainly compared to the time it spent in beta. Einstein Automated Contacts goes in Feb of next year. Recommendation is to move to its replacement, Automatic Contact Creation. Close date predictions, which is a feature of deal insights in pipeline inspection, that retires in the spring 25 release. That should land early March next year. The recommendation is to move to Einstein Opportunity Scoring. Note that this is just this feature. The other aspects of deal insights remain as is. Embedded appointment management and embedded flows retire next June. So move to field service if you need this kind of functionality, or experience builder if you need flows in web pages. API versions 21 to 30 go in the summer 25 release. That will be a breaking change. They will error, so make sure you've updated those integrations. And also in summer 25, standard volume platform events go. So if you haven't moved over to the high volume platform events at that point in time, you will stop receiving them. So you really do want to move over. And looking at a bit further, legacy chat retires on Valentine's Day 2026. A nice little present there. And interestingly, the Salesforce for Outlook in retirement has been pushed back, but not by a small amount, by nearly 3.5 years to December 2027 from June 2024. So clearly someone with clout wants that to stick around for a bit longer. Next, some general updates. If you're not in the UK and wondering why that's full of Union Jacks, this is an attempt to reference the general election that we had a few months ago that kind of seems like years ago now. Supported browser versions, these rarely change. Latest Edge, Chromium, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, apart from iPadOS, which is just Safari, and Classic Console, which supports everything but Safari. There's a new license in town, and this is something that we've been, many of us have wanted for a number of years. This is login-based licensing for internal users. They haven't come across login-based licensing before. This is where you charge based on the number of times your users log in every month, rather than paying a per user license fee. So if you've got 100,000 users, but only 5,000 of them are going to log in a particular month, you just buy 5,000 login-based licenses. I'd expect the entry level to be several thousand logins a month. So if you've got, this is going to be large user base who rarely use Salesforce, rather than a way to reduce license costs for your standard users. This is going to be available from October the 15th. This has been available in communities stroke experiences for a number of years, but I think it's interesting that it's coming to the internal users, and maybe this is an indication of Salesforce getting more and more into consumption-based licensing rather than per seat licensing. We shall see. Einstein search queries are now subject to limits. So I would say I've put the limits in here from the last time I checked, but these definitely changed in the last few weeks. So I would make sure to check the release notes if you do think there's any chance of you breaching these, because they, again, maybe they were revised down, and I guess they may be revised down again. So these are on a per user basis with a 5-minute window. It doesn't actually seem that draconian to me, given that it's per user, it's not across all of your users. So it's 3,000 queries or 200,000 CPU milliseconds. So that is quite a lot. I'd expect to only be breaching that if I had some kind of automated service tied to a user. And if you do exceed this, you'll get an error message. The request won't be queued or anything like that. We've mentioned this a number of times before, but there's a new setup domain coming. So if you apply allow lists, then make sure you add star.salesforce-setup.com to ensure there is no disruption. There's a bunch of release updates being enforced this release. I won't go through them all, but if these affect you, then dig deeper in the release notes. Also be aware that these often get pushed out at the last minute. But they typically, even though that is the case, they are coming eventually. So if it's something that's going to affect you, you might as well get on top of it, get ahead of it, rather than waiting until it's actually forced on you, because eventually, while it gets pushed back a few times, they do actually do it. Again, if there's anything on here that affects you, I would also say go back to the release notes. They update all the time, and some of these are planned to be enforced this release don't actually happen. And to help you get ahead of what's happening next, this is what is currently planned for the next release, which will, as I said, that'll be spring 25, and that'll be scheduled for early March next year. And again, this may not be what actually happens, but this is what's currently planned to happen. So moving on to analytics. Einstein report formula generation. This helps with the technicalities of creating row level and summary formulas. So in the report edit page, you select create formula, shown on the left there with the amber highlighting. Then you click add summary formula or add row level formula to launch the formula builder. So on the Einstein tab, shown here with decorated with a 1, you describe what you want the formula to calculate in natural language in the box marked with a 2. For example, how many days did it take each opportunity to close? Then if you like what you see, you can click the insert formula button marked with a 3, and Einstein will then fill in all the fields for you. If you don't like it, use the thumbs up, thumbs down, and give feedback about why it wasn't useful, because that's the way these things improve. If it offers something and you don't like it, then explain why that can be used in improving the model. Some CRM analytics changes. You can now download directly from dashboard widgets using the new download option in the action menu. You can mark those downloaded items as confidential to ensure that your information remains secure even when it's been downloaded. And there are a bunch of additional query filter operators, which I'm sure you can read as well as I can, so I won't go through them individually. Some more CRM analytics changes. You can now decide whether action menus appear on the repeater menu via this handy checkbox, show widget actions. You can control whether tooltips appear in link widgets. You can have none, or you can have default, or you can create your own custom tooltip. And header formatting and column sorting is now available for table widgets. So this screen grab shows the formatting options. And a few number widget enhancements as well. And finally, for CRM analytics, you can now launch a flow. So on the interactions tab, as shown here, you click the add action button, then you choose the start flow action, and then you put the details in there. Now this applies to screen and auto launched flows. And as you can see down the bottom, you can also pass dynamic values to screen flows via the mapping section. Note that this is currently only available for the text widget. So next up, we go on to customization. This is spelt the US way, because if you search for it in the release notes, you will have to find it using the US spelling. First up, another great feature. This is more of Cheryl Feldman's great work, one of the best product managers at Salesforce, in my opinion. This is the user access summary. So this gives visibility into how a user has permission rather than just whether they have it or not. So you can find out what actually is doing it. If somebody is seeing something they're not expecting to, or they're not seeing something they are expecting to, this is where you can go and find out why that is, why they have permissions to do something. So you basically, on the action menu, you choose access granted by, and then you'll be able to view the detail. The user access summary, this is the full page shot of it. This also includes fields from the detail section of the user's assigned profile page layout, so you don't have to switch back to the user record quite so much. I think it also demonstrates that the user functionality is a little bit behind some of the other functionality in Salesforce, because it's using page layouts rather than Lightning record pages for this. In the object manager, you can now see who has access to an object and why via the object access option. So this is down the bottom of the list, and it shows you the permission sets, permission set groups, and profiles that grant access to users. So again, if you're trying to figure out why someone either does or doesn't have access, this is a really good place to start. User list views are finally getting some love. With the new enhanced user list view, you can view, sort, and filter user records, and you can also inline edit them. Sticking with list views, these now use Lightning Web Components, so they should be faster, and they'll be future-proofed, because as improvements come into Lightning Web Components, they'll pick those up automatically. Should definitely be faster. Continue with the Lightning, actually moving on to the Lightning App Builder rather. Record highlights are now configurable, so rather than having to have a standard highlights panel with 6 fields on it, there's a new dynamic highlights panel component, so you can drag that onto the onto your layout, and you can add up to 12 fields and customize the actions available. Crucially, this also supports visibility rules, so you can conditionally show or hide fields in the panel. It's also supported on mobile, but you have to enable that, whereas it's enabled by default for the desktop. But this does look really cool. You know, more and more we're able to give a very customized experience to individual users based on the capabilities of the Lightning App Builder. This next feature I think looks very cool. The ability to conditionally format fields and display them using custom icons or colors based on their values. Those of us that have been around for a number of years in Salesforce world have built a huge amount of formula fields to do this kind of thing. So you have a value, then you have a formula field that references that value and generates a particular icon or generates a particular piece of HTML markup to render that in a particular color. So if you had sort of 3 or 4 of these on a page, you could easily find yourself burning another 8 custom fields just to display it in a particular way. So very cool. I had hoped to grab some screenshots of this in action, but sadly it doesn't start rolling out even to pre-release or sandbox orgs until later this month. Some changes next, starting with the description field on public groups. Very important for artificial intelligence, as we all know. Restriction and scoping rules now also support multiple pick list values in the criteria. That doesn't mean multi-select pick lists. It just means you can have a criteria that includes more than one selected value. So you could, if you were looking at, say, an opportunity, you wouldn't have to say this can be opportunities which are in the prospecting state. You can say this is opportunities in the prospecting state, or the quotation state, or the closed won state. And you can now use the public group summary page to manage members. So you can search across the current and available members and add and remove up to 100 at a time. Moving on now to my favorite topic, as always, development. So another Agentforce. I said there were two flavors of Agentforce. There's actually a third one, standard Salesforce, rename everything to Agentforce. This time it's for developers. This is free because developers never pay for anything ever. And it's a suite of tools to help your developers be more efficient. So you get an AI agent it works more conversationally rather than the single short request we saw for Einstein for developers. So you can ask it to do something, and then if it's not quite right, you can just keep refining it. You can ask it to have another go. You can tell it to include. So I was on the beta for this, and I had a couple of situations where I asked it to write a test method, and it didn't pick up that I had a test data factory. So all I had to do was tell it, why didn't you use the test method, or recreate this using the test data factory, and then it kind of figured that out, had the reference to it, and every test case thereafter, it would actually use the test data factory. So that was quite good. It did come along quite nicely. So this includes code generation, code explanations. I found those to be a little bit basic. It was almost, if you could read code, that was what it was explaining. It was almost going through it, but I would expect that to get better over time. It can also create test cases, I mentioned. It can write code comments. I think those are in Apex doc format, and also auto completion suggestions. So this is enabled in all Salesforce orgs, and it runs in VS Code and Code Builder, so it's part of Salesforce extensions. The license of the earlier versions of the licenses for Einstein for developers were very draconian. They committed you to Salesforce having access to your data and said they could do whatever to your code, rather metadata, so they could do whatever they want. It's now gone completely about face, and they say they will never use your data for training purposes. It doesn't get shared outside of Salesforce, etc. So if that was concerning you, then it should be in a lot better place now. But obviously, always check with your legal counsel to make sure that it works okay from the point of view of compliance. So there's some new Lightning Web components, and your regular reminder that component level versioning now applies. So if you want Winter 25 features, the API version of the component has to be set to 62. Set it to 61, it'll mimic Summer 24 features. You can apply multiple styles to a component via a JavaScript object or array. This is something that I find myself wanting to apply multiple styles a lot, so I end up with generating string properties just to list a bunch of classes. So you can now do that simply by binding to an array or an object. So much more straightforward, much cleaner. You can also access the parent element of a component in a callback. So if you just do this.host element after somebody's clicked a button or something like that, you can find out what is actually hosting you. And you can also access information about a component style information and mutate it, change it via the this.style property. So again, that's quite nice. Rather than having to go and look up classes and things like that, you can just dump straight into the style. The maximum size of Lightning Web Component JavaScript has been increased from 128 kilobytes to 1 megabyte. If you're thinking this is great, I would remind you that this has to be delivered to the user's browser. So try to bear any performance implications you might be introducing in. It's just because you can do more doesn't mean you should do more. The enablement of Lightning Web Security is indefinitely postponed. That's quite interesting. Don't remember seeing those words too often in Salesforce release notes before. But I would recommend, and Salesforce would recommend, that you try it out to see if you can use it, to see if it works for you, as it's clearly the future. You might find that it doesn't work for you and it breaks something fundamental, but this is the direction of travel. While it's indefinitely postponed, at some point in time, that postponement will finish. And there are some new distortions. I've listed them below, but I won't go into them. But if you're interested in the technicalities, you can follow the short links shown to see exactly how they are distorted. And if you want to find out if it's distortions that are causing you a problem, you can disable the distortions made by LWS when you're in browser debug mode and see if that fixes your problem. And that will inform your decision as to whether you can move to Lightning Web Security or not. Visualforce pages are now served on the force.com domain or on the domain of the site that is hosting them. So if you have any hard-coded reference to the old domains, which would be salesforce.com, you need to update those as they'll stop working. Interestingly, this was part of the work to handle third-party cookie blocking that Google said they were going to do, and now they're rowing back on because they've realized how much it will affect their ad revenues. But I'm sure at some point in time, things will come back again. It seems like a given. Moving on to Apex, there's a free tier of event monitoring available to track Apex exceptions. Free tier, again, another set of words that I don't hear an awful lot in Salesforce, really, I don't read an awful lot in Salesforce release notes. This is allowing you to track Apex exceptions, unhandled exceptions. So what you'll get is the Apex unexpected exception event type, and it includes these types of methods. So that is very cool. I'm sure I read somewhere, I can't find it in the release notes, but I'm sure I saw somewhere that they may only last for 24 hours. So this is one of the things that you want to get into the habit of checking regularly. SOCL error messages have been updated to be more informative. This is a potentially breaking change, because if you're interrogating the exception, parsing the error message and relying on particular text, you're not going to find that anymore, so your code may fail. You can find more details about exactly what's changing at the short link shown. Going forward, you won't be able to modify a set while iterating it, which might seem like an odd thing to do, but often, people used to do this kind of thing so that they could get a revised set without actually having to create a new one. So just as I wander through, if I don't want an element, just remove it. If you do that now, if you try and modify an element, an exception will be thrown. Previously, it kind of sometimes allowed you to do that, and it definitely led to unexpected results. If you're accessing APIs via Salesforce generic instance URLs rather than your my domain URL, then you'll need to update that code by the 12th of October, as the redirection will stop working. From a governance perspective, this is a much better approach anyway, as those links don't change even if there's an org migration, because they're associated with your domain rather than the underlying Salesforce instance. So if you fix this once before October the 12th, you should be done forever. And cancellation of metadata deployments, metadata API deployments has been speeded up. Again, this might be something you haven't particularly encountered, but under certain circumstances, you could sit for an awful long time. I've definitely waited 20 minutes for something to cancel, thinking that I might as well have waited for it to continue and fail than to try and cancel it, because it doesn't seem to be stopping any quicker than just waiting for it. But it should be faster going forward. Sandbox is next. If you're using data masks, you can now define your own masking library to control how PII replacements are generated. So if you want to see a particular format, they're yours. And also with the latest data mask manage package, the setup and administration of data mask jobs has been simplified. And if you're using developer or developer pro sandboxes and you create those via the setup UI, you will need to provision access via a public group. Everybody will be disabled by default. So this will speed up creation times, and it also increases security, because it means people only get access to that if they actually need it, as long as you don't create, obviously, a public group with every role in it. So this is for the UI at the moment, but it's coming to sandboxes created through other mechanisms in spring 25, so allegedly March next year. Flow next, always a lengthy topic. That team continues to enjoy high levels of investment that I'm sure other teams are jealous about. There's a new errors and warnings pane that you can see on the right there. This gives chapter and verse about why you can't activate your flow and links you to the problem component so that you can try and fix it. And there's also new functionality that identifies issues that might slow down your flows or breach limits. So popping up little tips to tell you how you can improve things. The action button component is now generally available. So you can use this to launch a screen flow and then see the results within the same screen. So, here, for example, you could hit, once choosing an account, you have an action button of get contacts that can then kick off a flow that goes and gets those contacts and returns them back, and then they can be displayed within this component rather than having to navigate off to a separate screen or anything. You can now use the repeater component to update existing collections. Well, actually, I think that's a really nice tweak. And this has multiple outputs, because always the key thing is when you're changing the existing record collection, how do you know what someone's done? You know what's there now, but you want to get the details of what did they remove. So you're having to compare that against the old one. You can spend a lot of time and a lot of code figuring that out. So this gives you all the changes, what was added, everything that's there, what the pre-populated list looked like, and what was removed. And you can also configure if users can actually add elements or remove elements, or if they can only tweak the records that are in there. There are more components that can be disabled at runtime. So you achieve this by setting the component's disabled attribute. And there's a list of the elements there. Again, I won't read those out. I'm sure you can all read as well as I can. And the choice component now supports multi-selects. So you can include up to 25 elements in there if you decide to configure that many. Custom components now show their labels and API names. So if you have several on the same screen, you can tell which is which. This is a problem we used to hit a lot in the old page layout editor. If you had 4 fields named amount, you never knew which one you were dealing with until they put on the details of hovering over it and seeing the API name. So it's always good to see this kind of thing. You can launch a prompt flow from a prompt flow as a subflow. Lots of prompts and flows in there, but basically prompt flows are available to be launched from other things rather than just from prompts. And you can update records from the create record component rather than always inserting. And you can also choose how it matches against existing records. Does it use the ID of the record, or does it use an external ID or maybe some other field? And the transform element can now target primitives. More flow. The email action can now target up to 150 recipient addresses, which is up from 50, and it also now supports carbon copy and blind carbon copy recipients. The scheduled flow limit is now displayed in the debug details, as you can see down the bottom there. It tells you how many you're allowed to run. And you can now debug template triggered prompt flows. So if you've got prompt templates that are firing off flows, you can trigger those rather than just trying to guess what's going on. And in flows running against API version 62, which is Winter 25, you can enforce sharing rules when Apex launches a flow. However, crucially, the Apex class does have to be declared as with sharing. So I'm guessing that means it inherits the sharing rules based on the decorator in the Apex card. Moving on to flow orchestration. You can now view orchestration details in the automation app. This will show you the run stages, steps, log items, and you can also manage runs, those that are in progress, suspended, or failed. You can also copy and paste steps into any stage and drag and drop steps to rearrange the layout. This doesn't affect the ordering though, so maybe think about whether you need to do that, because you might just end up confusing your colleagues who don't understand why it's not running in the order that they can see displayed on the screen. And you can also customize the flow work orchestration component. So for every record page you drop it into, you can change the title, you can have a different default sort order, you can have the various information, you can set the visibility on, and if users don't have any work items, then you can hide it away from them completely. But that's only on you only have to do that on a per record page basis. Security now. So for those who've been around Salesforce as long as I have, you may remember sending, certainly shouldn't be doing it now because very insecure, obviously, but the ability to send the username and password in the URL through the UN and PW URL parameters, and that would allow you to log into Salesforce without getting through the login page. This is now permanently disabled in all orgs, as it should be. It's very insecure. On the JWT access token front, you can now revoke those for individual users. Previously, you had to revoke that for everything, and that immediately terminated any sessions. And what that generally meant was people didn't revoke tokens when they should because it caused a bit too much noise. So now you have that capability. Outbound HTTPS callouts now support transaction layer security 1.3, so the latest version. And starting on October the 4th, new Hyperforce orgs will use the Salesforce Edge network. Well, this means your requests are directed to the nearest Salesforce location where Edge is deployed, which will give you improved performance. If you don't want this, you can opt out by calling Salesforce support. Also an interesting time for Hyperforce, given that they had a bit of an outage on the Hyperforce instances yesterday, but we move on past that. Next up, the Einstein platform. So I'm not going to talk about Agentforce here because I kind of view Agentforce as a separate Agentforce platform as a separate thing now. This is the Einstein platform, which is the other artificial intelligence features. So the generative AI features, I think I've mentioned before, these are subject to a monthly release cycle because things change far too quickly in this space for 3 releases a year. So these are the features that are available as of September 2024. Again, I don't think there's any point in me reading those out to you. I'll give you a moment to read those, save my voice. Einstein bots. So these now support strict recognition. So with this configured, if you get customer message that are kind of gibberish, or they're a bit sweary or aggressive or irrelevant to the, they'll be directed to the confused dialogue. I'm not actually 100% sure what the confused dialogue does. Maybe ask them if they're confused, or maybe it says I'm confused. But anyway, that's what will happen. There are some new messaging components for enhanced bots. So allowing you to verify customer identity, embed an external application, send a form to a customer, or process a payment with Apple Pay. And enhanced bots can now recognize the intent of the first message. So previously you had to use standard bots if you didn't want to go multiple messages. Next up, Experience Cloud, starting with Aura and Lightning Web Runtime Sites, aka LWR. So the styling options for LWR have improved. You support more elements in the theme panel, including buttons and headings. And you can also anchor the header to the top of the page, which is quite nice. That's something we often want to do with web pages, and customize the color palette for the columns component. And also for LWR, you can customize account and contact URLs to use human readable information rather than record IDs. Much more SEO friendly, also can be more friendly for your users. So rather than having the record ID in there, my record ID, so that if that was, I don't know, can't even remember what the ID would be, but rather than an 18-character ID to recognize me, you could call that Keir Bowden, Bob Buzzard, whatever, put that in the URL, so it's much clearer. And more content types are now supported in the content management system for Aura sites, news, image, document, and custom content types that you create. The navigation menu for LWR sites, also known as the navigation bar or mobile navigation, depending on the targeted device, is now highly customizable and allowing you to adjust colors, border spacing, text styles, and accent lines. So getting a bit more pixel perfect there. The component supports menu options that are external URL, menu label, Salesforce object, and site page navigation options. The site logo is now available on all LWR site pages, whereas previously you were limited to including it on the login page only. And for Aura, you can enable or disable the modernized record experience. So this includes the create record form, record banner, and record detail. And those are built on Lightning Web components rather than Aura components. This is previously only available in Sandbox, and you can toggle this on or off via the settings shown in bold. You no longer need to create a custom domain to serve from the content delivery network from the CDN in a sandbox. You can simply use your enhanced domain. Note that this utilizes Cloudflare, so you need to be happy with that. You should update references to your old whatever.force.com site URLs to use your current domain names, because they'll no longer be redirected in non-production orgs, and this applies to Aura, Lightning Web Runtime, and Visual sites. And mobile publisher is generally available for experienced cloud sites built on Lightning Web Runtime. Next up, marketing, starting with Marketing Cloud Account Engagement, formerly known as Pardot. The duplicate prospect tool available in Optimizer doesn't, as its name suggests, duplicate prospects for you. Rather, it identifies prospect records with a shared email address so you can determine if they're duplicates and merge them. You can copy forms, emails, and a few additional file types to a content management system workspace. And you can open account engagement system email links in the Lightning application instead of having to navigate to pardot.com. And also you can pause or cancel prospect bulk deletion action requests submitted via the user interface or API using the table action manager. Next, marketing a cloud engagement, a very clear name compared to marketing cloud account engagement. Marketing a cloud engagement, this release takes place towards the end of this week and continues on over 3 weeks. And Salesforce run their own webinar on this where they give you a detailed overview of the new features. This is not actually scheduled yet, but if you follow the page shown, I'll keep checking back the page shown at the short link. That is where the details will appear once it is scheduled. Marketing Cloud Growth. So if you're using this, make sure to update your data kits to get the latest updates. For more relevant messaging, you can personalize emails using dynamically generated content. Campaigns that are launched based on an event triggered by an individual, such as buying a product or downloading a white paper, and you can pull this event data into the content, into the content to make it even more personal. And still on the content side, you can share content across workspaces and avoid alt text for images that are purely for decoration. If you're not familiar with alt text, that's what will be picked up by screen readers to explain what this image is actually showing. So if it's purely used to, I don't know, give a rounded corner on a box or something like that, then you don't need to provide alt text for that and explain it, because it's just part of the layout rather than the content. If you are using Einstein to generate content, you can now define the brand identity to use, giving you a bit more consistency in that generated content. And a few more changes in growth. There's a new preference page for SMS messaging, where users can opt in and out. So you use the preference manager merge field to add a link to this page. Lead and contact scoring rules now support multiple conditions. They support grouping of conditions related to a single object, and you can combine those two things to give even more complex scoring rules. And web tracking tools now track link and button clicks on your landing pages and external sites. Mobile next. You can open hyperlinks in advanced reports directly on your device. And also, if you've experienced a failed sync with Salesforce, if you've been using it in offline mode, there's now a button just to restart it, so you don't have to wait for that to kick itself back into life. Messaging on mobile is generally available. This applies to all enhanced messaging channels and includes messaging for in-app and for web. And you can send any kind of messaging component supported by the channel. Previously on mobile, this was limited to messages or voice notes. And you can also transfer a messaging session directly from your mobile. Moving on to Sales Cloud, starting with account plans that were delivered because of ideas on the App Exchange. So, on the Idea Exchange. So if you ever wonder if it's worthwhile putting an idea on there, it may well be. So account plans show opportunity details marked with a 1. You can create SWOT analysis marked with a 2, so SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In the area marked with a 3, you can capture the market needs and dynamics. The area marked with a 4 gives you the clear measurable objectives to focus on, so the metrics. And in the area marked with a 5, you can visualize key stakeholders through a nice map, or a nice tree, in fact. Forecast submissions. So these are a snapshot of a forecast at a point in time, so you can see how it actually changes over time and see whether it's getting better or worse, so you can capture those. More on forecasts. Manager judgments. Note the spelling. There is not an E after the after the G. This caught me out quite a bit. So if you're searching, JUDGM. This now includes a roll-up of all descendants rather than previously the single level, as was the case before. And judgment values are now available in reports and dashboards. Forecasts can now include opportunity splits by territory, and the forecast charts have been renamed. So forecast changes is now called weekly changes, and historical trends is now known as monthly or quarterly trends, depending on the forecast periods that you're using. Some other changes in Sales Cloud. Seller Home is now available as a home page for any application, standard or custom. If you like it that much, you can put it everywhere. And as touched upon on the last slide, you can assign opportunity splits to territories. Previously, you could only associate these with the parent opportunity territory rather than move them around. And also teams can now forecast on these amounts. Person accounts now have a reports to field. So previously this was only available on contacts. So if you're using person accounts, you can now relate them to each other and generate a reporting hierarchy. And if you are syncing leads from LinkedIn lead forms to Salesforce, you need to manually disconnect your LinkedIn account, reconfigure the feature by enabling a new account, and then reconnect your account because LinkedIn have changed some stuff basically. If you don't do this by December the 16th, 2024, your sync will stop working. And our final topic for generally available features, Service Cloud. So a few new generative AI updates to mention. In conversation mining, third-party messaging apps are now supported for reports. Customized work summaries in Copilot are now generally available. So you can either create your own from scratch, or you can clone the standard entries. And on the email side, with Service Email Assistant, you can use case data to create personalized emails via standard, again, or custom prompt templates. Continue with email. If you enabled the Let Agents Move Emails settings, guess what? Agents will be able to move emails to a different case. So it does exactly what it says on the tin. There's new Lightning email threading behavior. So this disables the ref ID matching and instead uses a secure token in the subject or body. If no match is found through that token, it then checks the metadata in the email headers. This is a release update that was scheduled for spring 25. It now has no enforcement date, but I'd recommend you upgrade it because the ref ID version of threading is now in maintenance mode and it won't receive any improvements or enhancements. Another release update that doesn't have an enforcement date but you should definitely look at is moving to the Lightning editor in email to case. This has a lot more functionality than the legacy version and your agents will definitely appreciate that. Messaging next. Unified messaging allows marketing and service interactions in a single channel, so you don't need to maintain separate phone numbers anymore if you don't want to. Messaging for in-app and web API is generally available, as is messaging for mobile, as I mentioned earlier on. And messaging, you can activate or deactivate a channel and refresh a connection in messaging, which was previously only available in enhanced SMS. A little more on messaging. Error messages are now shown in the org's default language rather than in English only. So nice for those people where English isn't their first language or indeed the language where they work. You can delete messaging users with open conversations yourself without opening a support case with customer support. So that should speed things up if you're doing that a lot. And there's a new messaging session metrics with KPIs, including average and maximum response time and message counts, so you can report on that. And another one for messaging, status-based capacity is now generally available. So this is capacity based on the status of accepted work, rather than trying to figure that out from the number of open tabs and sessions that an agent has. And if you are so inclined, you can bring your own channel, either by building your own or importing it from the App Exchange. Knowledge, you can now integrate knowledge and unified knowledge with Data Cloud. Why might you want to do this? Well, one thing it allows you to do is to use larger article sizes, up to 100 megabytes, and access them through a knowledge data model object. And obviously this will improve Einstein for Service generative AI features because it'll have more data to work with. You can connect unified knowledge to GitHub, ServiceNow, and Madcap Flare. And there is a tool to migrate knowledge from Classic to the Lightning version, and you have around 8 months to do this before Classic knowledge is retired in June 2025, 1st of June 2025. So if you haven't looked at this tool yet, maybe you want to pencil that in for the next couple of months. And finally, for Service Cloud milestones, you can now carry out flow actions for milestone events. So things like sending email alerts or Slack notifications or updating records when a milestone is completed or it's nearing violation or it has violated. And the time to next milestone is now available in the case list view, which allows reps to easily prioritize cases based on milestone status. So this brings us to the end of generally available features. So we're now going to take a look at what's on the way. Please note, these may never go GA. Always make your buying decisions on generally available features. This is just to let you know what you may see. This is one for the developers, Lightning Web Components real-time preview. So basically, as soon as you change the code, the Lightning Web Component updates and the UI updates, no need to redeploy. As you can imagine, this doesn't work for everything. It's basic HTML and CSS edits, new components that are CSS only, or JavaScript edits that don't kind of make huge changes or affect the public API of the component. This is part of Lightning Web Components local dev, which is also in beta, and this works in Lightning containers only. So it's the Lightning Experience, the mobile app, and Lightning Web Runtime sites for Experience Cloud. It's also for sandboxes and Scratch orgs only, and it currently relies on the Salesforce CLI. Note that it's also disabled by default, as a beta feature should be, and it requires setup to use. If you're interested in finding out more about this and using it, then follow the short link shown. Sorting list views by up to 5 columns. I do like this feature. So basically, configure the columns in order. So in this case, I want to sort by earliest close date and then sort smallest to largest amount. Now you can see there are 3 closing on September the 10th, and these are shown in order of smallest to largest. So 20,000 comes first, then the 50,000, then the 100,000. So a lot more, make your list views a lot more readable. Salesforce Archive is in pilot. So this is a native archiving solution that moves expired and unused records to lower cost data storage external to Salesforce. I'm sure we're all aware, Salesforce storage for immediate access isn't the cheapest. Once it's moved, you haven't lost it for all time. You can still visualize the data in your org via Salesforce Connect. And if you fancy a play with this, archiving is handled through jobs that you can configure to run on an automated schedule, and you configure which records and files that it will target. Note that this is only available in certain countries. No idea why, just the way it is. And that brings me to the end of the content. As always, Salesforce have a release homepage. There's a trailhead badge. You can treat yourself to the currently at 740 pages of release notes, should you be so inclined. So let's have a look and see if there's any questions. Please, is this meeting recorded? Yes, it is. It's being recorded, and we send out the recordings and the slide deck once this is finished. Yeah, so going forward, if you can't make the time that it's available at, please still register because you'll get the recording after the event. Thanks for your question, Sarah. Okay, that is it. Thanks for joining, everyone. I realise your time is very valuable, and I hope to see you at the next one. Thanks very much and goodbye.